Hello, my name is Marcus Kamrath, and today I will be discussing the initiative and referendum processes in the state of Arizona. Arizona is one of the states that embraces the idea of direct democracy, meaning that people don't just elect lawmakers, but they can actually be lawmakers. Thanks to Article 4 of the Arizona Constitution, there exists systems of initiatives and referendums that allow citizens to act as both the creators of laws and the restrictors of laws. So let's first define initiatives and referendums. An initiative is a process that enables voters to create their own laws or propose amendments to the state's constitution. By gathering a required number of valid signatures from qualified electors, a proposed measure can be placed directly on the state ballot from its voters. For a state statute, it needs 10% of the state's electors' signatures, and for an amendment to the Constitution, it requires 15% of the state electors' signatures. If it's approved by the majority of the voters, then the proposal becomes a law. And according to the Arizona Constitution, this is a law that the governor cannot veto, and legislatures cannot repeal or weaken unless it receives at least 3/4 vote in each legislative chamber. So very, very safe laws once voted upon. A referendum, however, acts as the veto power of the people. So this is the power that allows citizens to oppose or veto laws that legislature actually does end up passing. So if at least 5% of qualified electors sign a referendum, that can pause the law and then send it to a ballot for public approval or rejection. The legislature itself also has the ability to just refer certain measures to the voters in the process of referendums. So most laws are delayed by 90 days to allow the time for a potential referendum challenge for citizens to vote to either strike down or allow a law to go through. Let's now talk about the process of initiatives and referendums. For an initiative, it starts by the drafting of a proposal, and then the proposal is then filed with the Arizona Secretary of State. This is the office that handles and regulates all initiatives and referendums in the state. The Secretary of State then assigns that initiative a serial number, and then signatures must be gathered. So special interest groups or individuals will then gather signatures, again requiring 10% of qualified electors for a state statute and 15% for a new amendment. Then signatures are submitted to the Secretary of State. It's verified and certificated by the Secretary of State's office, and if valid, it is then placed on a ballot in the next general election, and the issue is voted upon by the state citizens. For a referendum, it follows a similar but slightly different process. First, instead of drafting a proposal, the citizens must identify the law for which they want to propose a referendum. And at that point, they can go ahead and start gathering signatures, again, requiring 5% of qualified electors to send this issue to a referendum vote. After they gather signatures, they are submitted again to the Secretary of State's office, where they are verified and certificated. And if that referendum is valid, then that measure is placed on a ballot in the next general election, very similar to an initiative. There are some important considerations regarding this process. Some laws are deemed emergency necessary and are not subject to referendum. Additionally, the governor's veto power, like I mentioned before, does not extend to these initiatives or referendums. And finally, as mentioned before, the Secretary of State is required to provide guidelines and resources so citizens are able to participate in the initiative and referendum process. Now let's compare and contrast some similarities and differences between initiatives and referendums. They have substantial similarities and differences in terms of purpose, origin, scope, and effect. In purpose, an initiative creates a new law or a constitutional amendment, where a referendum approves or repeals an existing law and existing legislation. In origin, both are proposed by citizens. Both are triggered by citizens and require citizen vote in order to move forward. So they share that similarity. The process, as I just mentioned, also follows a similar path where they need to gather signatures, submit it to the Secretary of State's office, where it is then placed on a ballot if signatures, if it meets the requirement. While initiatives require a proposal to be submitted before votes are gathered, a referendum does not. And then, as mentioned, signatures are gathered. There are different thresholds for initiatives and referendums. I have mentioned that already. For initiatives for a state statute and for a new amendment, you need either 10 or 15% of qualified elector signatures, respectively. And for a referendum, it is only 5%. So a slightly lower barrier for a issue to move in the referendums situation. And then finally, the effect is different as well. One creates and one removes. So the initiative creates a new law or a new amendment where a referendum removes it. So initiatives are generally viewed as proactive tools where citizens start and use this tool to create something, where referendums are viewed as reactive tools. So citizens use these to challenge laws passed by lawmakers. And both of these processes enhance direct democracy and give voters a significant role in shaping the state law. But they do differ in timing and purpose and scope, as I've outlined. Let's now talk about some pros and cons of initiatives and referendums. Initiatives have several pros, several strengths. First of all, they allow for direct lawmaking without waiting for legislature. Many other states that don't have initiatives, their citizens are required to wait for their legislatures to take action on their own. Also, it leads to policy innovation that legislature may overlook. Additionally, it provides citizens with the power to check government inaction or overreach, actually giving citizens some accountability in holding their government responsible. And additionally, it enhances civic participation and public engagement by having a direct way to impact laws and procedures in the state. Citizens are more likely to participate and engage. Some of the cons of initiatives, they can be very complex and the proposal can be very detailed, and this can go beyond most voters. Additionally, initiatives are prone to the influence of special interest groups. Large businesses or special interest groups can carry a lot of sway and a lot of influence on whether your initiatives pass or not. Additionally, some poorly drafted laws can still bypass legislature through the initiative process, so there is the risk that a law ends up being passed that may be poorly worded or poorly drafted that leaves some ambiguities after it's been voted upon. And finally, legal challenges. There are always legal challenges with creating a new law that exists, whether citizens are creating it or elected officials. Now, talking about referendums, some of the strengths of referendums give citizens the power to hold legislature accountable. It gives them that ability to publicly check the power of legislature and to veto things that they believe are unjust or may violate the state's constitution. Similarly to initiatives, this just enhances civic engagement and public participation. When citizens know that they have the power to influence change and to check public policy, they'll do so. Some of the cons of referendums include voter fatigue and disengagement. Many issues go to referendum votes in Arizona, and some voters feel there are simply too many referendums, and this actually keeps them disengaged. Similarly to initiatives, referendums are prone to the influence of powerful special interest groups and are prone to legal challenges, just like initiatives. And additionally, there may be some public delay or public uncertainty regarding referendums. There is usually a 90-day delay for new laws to be subject to referendum, and those delays can cause uncertainty and can allow voters to maybe change their mind and will cause referendums to lose some of their strength. Finally, let's just talk about how direct democracy, how initiatives and referendums really are a vital component of this in Arizona. So as outlined, initiatives and referendums, they give power to the people, and that is something that doesn't exist in this full scope in representative government. In a direct democracy, citizens directly engage and directly have power over their legislature. And that is something that's just not true of a system that only allows representation rather than direct action. This direct democracy is founded in the Arizona Constitution. It has a constitutional foundation. And the Arizona Constitution states that legislative authority of the state shall be vested in the legislature, but the people reserve the power to propose laws and amendments and to enact or reject such laws. So this really underscores the state's commitment to direct democracy. This system is built into the very foundational documents of the state. And how does this go on to support direct democracy? Well, as mentioned, it empowers citizens to directly impact change. It ensures accountability. It provides a mechanism for voters to object to action of legislature, to enact their own legislature, which encourages civic engagement and fosters a much more informed and actively participating electorate population. Ultimately, these make it so that the government remains responsive to the will of the people, something foundational in any democracy. And in Arizona, initiatives and referendums allow the people to remain in control and to allow the state to move forward under the will of the people rather than the overreaching arm of the government. Thank you very much.